this video, we're going to be discussing Act 3 of The Tempest. As a brief summary, Act 3, Scene 1 contains a kind of romantic interlude between Ferdinand and Miranda. Ferdinand has been gathering wood for Prospero. He's been executing some basic physical labors that Prospero has subjected him to after their somewhat fraught meeting earlier on in the play. He has become somewhat accustomed to it, or acclimatized to it, and it seems almost as if time has passed differently on this island, so their perception, to a certain degree, seems to shape the reality that they experience. Ferdinand, on numerous occasions, asserts that the labors to which he has been subjected and confined are, in fact, not particularly burdensome. Rosalind wants to aid him. She wants to assist him in carrying out her father's commands. And Prospero sits in the distance, unseen by the other characters, offering asides, commentaries on the events that transpire in this act, or in this scene. What we have here is, by way of Prospero almost stepping off the stage, a moment of meta-theatricality. He observes the affairs of the play as a substitute audience. But, of course, he's the one who has orchestrated all these events. He's the one who has put the pieces into place, who has arranged Ferdinand's activities and has allowed Miranda, because he has almost complete control of everything physical on the island, to meet with him in this moment. And he's well aware of what's transpired between them. So he serves as a kind of meta-theatrical analog for the audience in this moment, as a character who is interjecting asides. By way of his commentary on these events, and the fact that we understand that he could intervene at any moment to put a stop to them, and what he says of his own motives and his own objectives, gradually we gain a sense of Prospero's character, and we're exposed to other sides of the man that we weren't initially able to understand based on his interactions with Miranda and the tempestuous storm that he called up in Act 1, Scene 1. We also begin to learn something about Prospero's motives and his intentions, the objectives that he has in engaging with Ferdinand and his adversaries from Milan and Naples. Before I start delving into the text, I'd like you to gain some facility and experience grappling with the text in order to essentially do what you will be doing when it comes time for you to write an essay on the Tempest. Pause the video, take about 15 minutes to think about these questions, and then return, and I'll offer some commentary about this scene. Alright, so the scene begins with Ferdinand essentially becoming a substitute Caliban, in the sense that he is entering into the scene performing the menial and manual labors that Caliban was required by Prospero to effect. And he enters in bearing a log, so Caliban in Act 2 was sent away to gather wood for Prospero. Here, Ferdinand is doing the same thing. Now, look at how Ferdinand responds to his confinement, in contrast to Caliban. While Caliban rankled under this unjust, in his view, service to Prospero, Ferdinand treats this burdensome series of tasks as almost joyous, an occasion for celebration. There be some sports are painful, and their labours delight in them set off. Some kinds of baseness are nobly undergone, and most poor matters point to rich ends. So, whereas Caliban could only fixate on the travails of the pains and the struggles of the moment, Ferdinand here is saying that I can look forward to the rewards that I will enjoy because of this labor. The ability to defer gratification, the ability to say that I'm going to suffer somewhat now in order to achieve what I want later in life, is one of the marks of, well, the transition from adolescence to adulthood. It's a mark of the humanity that we gain by transcending the sort of base and momentary concerns, or transient concerns, and immediate concerns of infancy. In this moment, as Prospero is watching, Ferdinand, in his commentary, reveals a kind of evolved humanity, a greater understanding and appreciation for his own situation that allows him to bear burdens with a smile, because he believes that there is a reward waiting for him at the end of these labors. And that reward, in his mind, is potentially the hand of Miranda that he has essentially fallen in love with immediately. These poor matters, the struggles that he's undergoing now, point to rich ends. It points towards the riches that he will be able to obtain. This my mean task would be as heavy to me as odious, but the mistress which I serve quickens what's dead, and makes my labors painless. So he's looking at the mistress that he serves. He doesn't imagine himself serving Prospero. He imagines himself serving Miranda. And this service then becomes a delight to him because he wants to serve her. My labors are now her pleasure. Oh, she is 10 times more gentle than her father's crab, and he's composed of harshness. So again, we have this unification and contrast of harshness and tenderness. And yet, what Ferdinand says here may not entirely be legitimate of Prospero. It seems on the surface that Prospero is being unreasonably harsh, as we discussed in our interactive class. He seems to despise Ferdinand. On the one hand, this might be a transference of the hatred that he has for Ferdinand's father onto the son, a subconscious response to the son, because he sees in the young man something of his own father, or something of the young man's father. And so Prospero is caught up in his own sense of loathing and his desire for revenge. And yet, he's also tender in this moment, because even though Ferdinand says that Prospero is all crabbed, he's all sort of pinched up and distorted by rage that is unreasoning, at the same time, Prospero looks upon this scene with joy and pleasance. He finds this something in which he can revel. He enjoys the interactions that he has orchestrated and that he has put into place. He's set the scene, right? He's set the stage for the two people who are on stage at this moment. Again, it's almost like he's written the story of this act, of this scene. And now he has just allowed the characters to enter into the environment, the context that he has set for them, the stage that he has set for them. And they begin to play out the lines in ways that he didn't necessarily expect, but that are immensely satisfying to him. Now, Ferdinand is overjoyed. My sweet mistress weeps when she sees me work, and says such baseness had never like an executor. In other words, such base labor never had so wondrous a person to execute it. Right? I've never seen so glorious and wondrous a person affecting such menial and base work. So those commentaries, or those observations, and the praise, the extolation that she levies on Ferdinand, all point towards the feelings of affection that she has for him that makes his labors light. Now Miranda comes upon him and asks him not to work so hard. And she says that I would rather lighten this load. I would do what I can. I would help you in the labors that you have. And what we have in this moment is a kind of gesture towards that almost prelapsarian world of complementary interactions between men and women. Right? Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Adam, who is laboring, right? And you have Eve, who comes in as the helpmeet for him, the helpmate to him. So there's this interactivity and this reciprocity in their relationship that is just burgeoning at this point, where they share each other's burdens, in this case, physically. But that's obviously metaphorical for the sharing of burdens in a relationship. Ferdinand extols Miranda's virtue, and he uses rarefied, elevated language that Miranda isn't really equipped to grapple with or to understand. O most dear mistress, the sun will set before I shall discharge what I most strive to do. So this is going to take a great amount of time. And then she offers to assist him. And she says, no, precious creature, I had rather crack my sinews, I'd rather tear my muscles, break my back, than you should such dishonor undergo, while I sit lazily by. So I'm not going to let you do this. I will take on all this heavy burden myself, because I would rather do that than let anything happen to you. And see you labor in this base way. Now, Miranda responds to this by becoming almost overwhelmed in her emotional response. Part of that is because she's utterly new at this. She has never actually interacted with another human male aside from her own father. She's never seen someone who, in her own mind, is akin to a god. She has never seen a member of the opposite sex, and so immediately he becomes this glorious and wondrous creature. Now, Prospero tries to undercut this idealization on her part in the earlier act, Act 2, when he says, trust me, if you saw other men, you would look at this one and say that he, compared to them, is like a Caliban. He's so hideous and ugly. Prospero is trying to work against Rosalind's penchant for idealization. Because, of course, she is inexperienced. He's trying to counsel her and essentially attenuate her overreactions that are entirely understandable given the way in which she's been raised in isolation. However, Prospero also delights in these interactions. Miranda looks upon him and says, "It would become me as well as it does you. I would be just as fit for this kind of work because I'm just as fit for you." Prospero in his aside says, "Poor worm, thou art infected." This vexation shows it. So it's almost like he's offering these sardonic little asides at the spectacle of young infatuation and young love. They go back and forth discussing what it is that they should do and how they should sort of divvy up the labor. Here, however, we see what it is that Prospero might understand is so dangerous. His daughter, as intelligent as she is, as possessed of a will and voice as she might be, sufficient to challenge her father, castigate him, and decry his immorality or his seeming immorality in Act 1, Scene 2, is still innocent. She's still essentially ignorant, whereas Ferdinand, by his own admission, that Prospero takes very careful heed of, is experienced. So, in line 38 of this version of the text, we have Ferdinand praising Miranda. Admired Miranda, indeed the top of admiration. You are so beautiful. You are the most beautiful woman in the world. You're the top of admiration. Worth what's dearest to the world. You're worth any price that I could pay. Now, think about Prospero as a man who understands he has been married, he has known women and men, he has seen the ways of the world. This kind of extolation, this kind of over-exaggerated admiration is very often insincere. No woman is this paragon of perfection, just as no man is. That in and of itself is a kind of reductive, inhuman portrayal of a person. It's flattering. Now, maybe Ferdinand is so caught up in love that this could be meant sincerely, if, well, ridiculously and foppishly on his part. But Prospero is, as a man, and an experienced one, is well aware of the way in which men can, well, use and abuse women by flattering their egos, particularly when they're as innocent and inexperienced as Miranda, for all her intelligence. She's not experienced. So, the undercurrent of his grandiose and excessive praises introduces something slightly disturbing, and Prospero picks up upon it, even if Miranda can't. Ferdinand says here, full many a lady I have eyed with best regard. What's this now? He's been interested in many women, and many times the harmony of their tongues hath into bondage brought my too diligent ear. So I've fallen in love with their voices, they've almost enraptured me and captured my heart. Oh, Prospero says, that's not good. You fall in love very easily, it seems. So even though Prospero doesn't necessarily say any of these things, we have this disturbing undercurrent of Ferdinand's inconstant affections. And Prospero, as a very concerned father, who said that Miranda was the very thing, the only thing that kept him sane, that kept him alive, the only thing that he had in the world, and the only piece of his dead wife that he can carry with him, the only thing that he has left in this world. Is she being imperiled at this moment? Prospero has orchestrated this. He wants the two characters to get together. He wants his daughter to have a fulfilling romantic relationship. And he wants Ferdinand to be the one to join with her. But there's something very disquieting about what Ferdinand has said here. The fact that he is far more experienced, and he admits to being enraptured by women, and obviously he's not with them anymore. For several virtues have I liked several women. Whoa, you've liked several women. Okay, Prospero says, I'm somewhat discomforted by this. Never any was so full soul, but some defect in her did quarrel with the noblest Gratio. I see some fault in all these other women, or I saw some fault in all these other women, that made them less beautiful to me, less perfect to me. Now, Prospero hears this, and he must be thinking, well, for you, when you look at Miranda and see what she's actually like, not some perfect paragon, because no human being is, that's an unreasonable and unattainable standard. When you see that she's willing to speak her own mind and to counter you as she did me, might you think that that's a fault? He doesn't know. And put it to the foil, but you, oh you, so perfect and so peerless, are created of every creature's best. You're like the best that I've ever seen in every single woman, all aggregated and into this one gestalt being. So, we have this elevated language of love, but for us and for Prospero, we're meant to recognize that there's something potentially, at least, untoward about the way in which he valorizes and extols Miranda. Now, Miranda tries to undercut these assertions by asserting that she's really nothing special at all. I do not know one of my own sex, no woman's face remembers, save from my glass of mine own. I've never seen another woman's face, or at least I can't remember any woman's face, save from my own that I've seen in a mirror. Nor have I seen more than I may call men than you, good friend, and my dear father. How features are abroad I am skilless of, but by my modesty, the jewel of my dower, I would not wish any companion in the world but you, nor can imagination form a shape besides yourself to like of. Now, Miranda might be inexperienced, but she's still very cunning, and she has an intuitive sense of what's going on here. She may not recognize it consciously, but she too picks up upon the reality that Ferdinand is more experienced than her and has had innumerable women in his life, whatever that might mean. Because she says, unlike you, who have had all these women, I have never even seen a man, so I don't know how you compare. But by my modesty and the jewel of my dower, in other words, that's my only dowry, my modesty, my chastity, and that's something she's conscious of because she picks up upon the sexual connotations and resonance of Ferdinand's observations regarding his past experience with women. So she re-emphasizes her modesty and the singularity of her potential affections, the desire that she has to be committed to and to possess only one man. So it's almost like in this moment she is engaging with the observations that he has made about his own past. Now, this subtle undercurrent to their interactions continues. Ferdinand attempts to essentially wrest defeat from or wrest victory from the jaws of defeat. He recognizes that he has been potentially too effusive in his praise. Right? He has entered into this rarefied language of praise that courtly interactions and courtesy that Miranda finds a little bit off-putting because she can sense potentially their insincerity and also, well, that reality that he has obviously spoken this way to all those other women that he seemed so infatuated with, who held his heart but then lost it. So, he says, look at what I'm actually doing. I would no more endure this wooden slavery than to suffer the flesh fly below my mouth. Hear my soul speak. Now I'm going to speak to you honestly. The very instant that I saw you did my heart fly to your service. There resides to make me slave to it, and for your sake am I this patient longman. Look, if you doubt my sincerity, look at what I'm doing. I am your slave. I'm laboring for you in this way. So he's affirming the way in which he is willing to serve her. And then Miranda looks at this and asks, do you love me? Right? I'm not sure that I understand how this is supposed to work. So we get this wealth of her inexperience and her lack of practical, applicable knowledge, even though she's well educated, because of course she's grown up in isolation. O heaven, O earth, bear witness to this sound, and crown what I profess with kind event, if I speak true. If hollowly, invert what best is bodded me to mischief. I, beyond all limits of what else I in the world do love, prize, honor you. So in other words, invert everything that is good and that defines me, shift it, transform it into something base and ugly, turn it all to mischief. If I'm lying when I say that I love you, I prize you, and I honor you. Now, Miranda, we get the sense, begins to weep at this point for joy. I am a fool to weep at what I am glad of. Now, Prospero again reveals his character and his desire, his sincere desire for his daughter to fall in love. We know that Prospero was married at some point. Now, obviously, his wife is deceased. So he looks upon this interaction, and it seems like it fills him with joy and satisfaction to see his daughter experiencing the very emotions that once brought him satisfaction, that brought his daughter into his life, the love that he had for his wife. So Prospero, acting as the audience and also the playwright, the character who has set all of this in motion, who has put the characters in their roles, who has told them how they should enter the scene, he set the stage for all of this. And now he sits back to watch the play that he has written. O fair encounter of two most rare affections, heaven rain grace on that which breathes between them. So he's blessing them. He wants them to be successful. He wants them to be happy. Now, that causes us to question later on in the play why he's still so harsh towards Ferdinand. Again, it might be because he looks at Ferdinand and sees in him his father, and he can't divest the loathing that he has for the man's father from the son. But there are other reasons as well that we'll explore as we go on in this play. Now, Ferdinand asks, why are you weeping? Miranda, here, because she is so caught up in emotion, reveals to us Prospero's concerns, and also her own recognition of her, let's say, sexual impulses. She says that my unworthiness that dare not offer what I desire to give, and much less take what I shall die to want. Now, she means his love, but there is this connotation of giving that which should not be given, particularly in this context, particularly in this historical and social context, like giving that which should not be given before all due rites and are ministered and performed. So there's a sexual undercurrent to what Ferdinand is talking about as in his desire to serve her, and in his commentaries about his past experiences, and in Miranda's commentary here about, well, daring not to offer that which she so desires to give, that is, herself. But this is trifling, and all the more it seeks to hide itself the bigger bulk it shows. So, as an undercurrent for her language, the thing that seeks to hide itself the bigger bulk it shows reflects a kind of gesture towards pregnancy. So we have these sort of sexual allusions or sexual imagery infecting her commentary here. Hence bashful cunning, so she immediately tries to pull back in bashful cunning and prompt me plain and holy innocence. I am your wife if you will marry me. So she's trying to neutralize the animalistic passions and the swirling maelstrom of desire that is an undercurrent in her own mind to everything that she's speaking about here, and the threat of improper sexual impulses that Ferdinand raises earlier on when she says, I am your wife if you will marry me. If not, I'll die your maid. I'll be your fellow. You may deny me, but I'll be your servant, whether you will or no. Now, what Miranda is doing here is unconscious. The sexual undercurrent in this exchange is not intended by her, but it seems to be a subtle reflection on Shakespeare's part of the direction of her thoughts that she doesn't even quite understand because she still is young and is entirely inexperienced in matters of courtship and love. That undercurrent continues in her offer to become his servant. I will die your maid, I will die in your service if I don't become your wife. And in that case, maid has this ambiguous double meaning. Maid can either mean a virgin or a servant. And in this sexual connotation, it seems as if there might be a gesture towards something improper. Again, Miranda doesn't mean it that way consciously, but Shakespeare is charging this scene with an undercurrent of sexuality that is meant to be distressing. Now, Prospero looks upon the scene as the two profess their willingness to marry, their willingness to commit to each other, and ensure that they neutralize all of the distressing animalistic elements of their relationship by binding it under this social contract and religious contract of marriage. Prospero looks upon this as they go off, and he says, So glad of this as they I cannot be, who are surprised withal, but my rejoicing at nothing can be more. So I look upon this spectacle of young love, my daughter finding love and finding happiness with this man. And there is nothing in the world, he says. And he's speaking alone, he's speaking to himself, he's speaking to us directly. There's nothing in the world that could bring me more happiness, because there's nothing in this world that matters to me more than my daughter. And yet, I can't be as overjoyed about this as they are, because it's a surprise to them. I've written this. This is exactly what I wanted to happen. And so I can't experience the revelation and the joy of the revelation. But there's nothing that could make me happy. Everything has gone according to my plan. It's perfect. Everything has been orchestrated exactly as I intended. And now, to my book, for yet ere supper time must I perform much business appertaining. So he's sat back. He's sat back to enjoy the scene of this play that in essence he has orchestrated, that he has composed as the playwright. And what does he do? Again, that meta-theatricality is at the forefront. Prospero reveals himself analogically as the kind of playwright who has created this work. Whoop, that scene's done. Now I've got to go off to my book to go write the rest of the play. It doesn't mean literally. What he's actually doing is he's going to his book in order to double check some of his magical spells so that he can control the other people on the island and affect his will on the island. But we've already said Prospero is like, or his art, his magic is like the art of writing. It's like the art of being a playwright. So that parallel continues on in this moment as he returns to his book. And on the one hand, literally in the story, it's like he's going to, well, it is that he's going to essentially review his magic spells. But in the context of the meta-theatrical analog that the play presents, it's like he's going to write the rest of the play. In the next video that you have to view for this unit, we'll be talking about Act 3, Scene 3. Act 3, Scene 2 will be covered in our interactive class this week.